Welcome, everybody. Very excited to be here. Thanks to Elena and Walker and Tico and Nancy Bass for allowing us to continue to do these great online panels at the Strand. So I thought what I would do is I'll do everybody's introductions, then I'll ask questions, and you guys can put questions in the chat or email me. Okay, so I'm just going to do it alphabetically. So Holly Baxter's debut novel, Clickbait, comes out from HarperCollins August 13th. And it's about a divorced journalist demoted at her job at a Manhattan tabloid. She's executive editor at The Independent in New York. She has experience in generating clicks on both sides of the Atlantic, having worked at The Independent's London office as a reporter. Her work was shortlisted for a press award for Feature of the Year, and she often appears on British radio and TV. She now lives in Brooklyn with her husband and son. Alan Henry is a writer, editor, blogger, gamer, streamer, classic geek, recovering physicist, journalist, and author of Seen, Heard, and Paid, The New Work Rules for the Marginalized, published by Penguin Random House, about the struggles he faced as a person of color at the New York Times. He's worked at the New York Times as the Smarter Living editor-in-chief of Lifehacker, and he's now the special projects editor at Wired magazine. Miya Lee started interning for the Modern Love column in 2014 when she was a freshman at Columbia University. Now is the New York Times Modern Love project editor. She elevates Modern Love submissions, oversees special products, and edits Tiny Love Stories, which led to her debut book, Tiny Love Stories, True Tales of Love in 100 Words or Less, published by Artisan Press, along with the Tiny Modern Love calendar. And she lives in Brooklyn, and in her free time writes non-modern love articles for the Times and makes short documentaries about New York City. Joy Peskin has written for Huffington Post, Salon, Glamour, Parents Magazine, Publishers Weekly, and Lilith, where her essay, My Mother, the Imposter, won a Simon Rackauer Award. She's an executive editorial director at Farrar Straus Giroux Books for Young Readers, and a court-appointed special advocate for teens in foster care. She's published books by my former students, Abby Scher, Christina Wyman, and Rebecca Morrison, and works on the side as a ghost editor. Rakesh Satyal is the author of the novel Blue Boy, which won a Lambda Literary Award and was called one of the 25 books that have shaped the LGBTQ reading experience over the last 20 years by the New York Times. He's also written No One Can Pronounce My Name, which received raves in NPR, Entertainment Weekly, and Rolling Stone, and he appeared on Late Night with Seth Meyers. He's taught at NYU, has been a senior editor at Simon & Schuster's Atria Books, and is now the executive editor at HarperCollins and lives in Brooklyn. Samantha Wekstein, my agent, has a BA from the University of Maryland. She began her career in 2013 at Writers House and joined Thompson Literary Agency in 2019. She represents young adult, middle grade picture books, romance, historical fiction, memoir, self-help, sci-fi, and fantasy. Her clients include Lainey Forbes, Joe Renfro, Ashley Sierra, Che, Jesse L. Starr, and has worked with my former students, Kenan Trabincevic, Orlando Mendiola, and Alex Miller. She lives in Westchester with her husband, dog, and new daughter, and she also does freelance editing on the side. Howard Yoon recently joined William Morris Endeavor's department as a partner and literary agent, handling nonfiction after the acquisition of the Ross Yoon agency, where he was an agent for more than 20 years. He used to teach an award-winning narrative nonfiction writing class in Georgetown's journalism program. He lives in DC with his wife and 3 kids. Welcome. So glad you guys could come. So a lot of my students know that my favorite thing to do is to have panels where I find the most brilliant literary minds, agents and editors, and we get to pick their brain and find out, all the secrets of publishing. So I'm going to start asking you guys questions. How does someone get lucky enough to work with you? Let's start with that, because of course everybody sees these panels and they fall in love with all the panelists, and they're always emailing me, hey, give me their phone number. I'm like, doesn't work that way. So Holly, let's start, even though you're about to be a famous debut novelist, let's start with your work at The Independent. I'm under the impression if somebody wants to work with you at The Independent, and you've been so generous, I'm helping my students break in, that they would have to send you a really, really good timely pitch or a short finished piece. Is that still the case?
Yes, basically, especially because it's an election year, we're really focused on taking politics, sort of themed pieces, reported pieces that talk about people's experience on the ground, a real Americans' experience of how those politics play out. So what I'm really looking for at the moment is people to do deep reporting in the communities that they're from or the communities that they are in, and bring something new to this election, which I know is a complete roller coaster. But you know, that just makes it more of a gold mine for writers, I think. And in terms of getting in touch, it very much is good to just do a short pitch explaining who you are, why you're the person to write this, and hopefully have a headline in mind so that you've kind of thought through exactly how you would sell it. Rarely will I take a full written piece. In some special circumstances, I might, but usually it's better to be timely and to immediately respond to something in the news by sending in that pitch rather than spending time writing something up and potentially losing out to someone who was quicker off the mark.
Awesome. Alan, so it seems like, again, a lot of my students have had luck with Wired. It seems like you also would prefer a short pitch with a title and a subtitle, although you say you guys aren't really timely. So you're not really looking for something that happened yesterday to run tomorrow, right?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on what part of Wired you want to pitch, though. The areas that I usually work with, like the service stuff and the consumer tech stuff, those things you don't need a timely peg for. In fact, the lead time to get things edited and published is pretty long there. However, some of the other desks are interested in more timely pitches. So, like our politics desk, which is brand new. Our culture desk, they're very focused on newsworthiness these days. So if you do pitch them, your success rate is probably going to be lower because they do have folks in-house to handle those newsy topics. But if you do have something great, definitely make sure to include, your what you think that great news peg is in your short pitch. You, again, also, just like Holly said, we generally don't take pieces on spec, mostly because one, we don't want you to work for free, but two, we're going to spend a lot of time going back and forth with edits, and we would rather help you shape that story from the beginning rather than make you do a bunch of rework.
Cool. And Miya, you're the exact opposite in that you don't want pitches. So for the New York Times Modern Love, again, and so many students have broken in, for the tiny love stories, people have to do 100 words and do it by submittable, I'm told. And for the Modern Love column, you have to write the entire 1,500 word piece and submit it, right?
It's 1,500 to 1,800 words for the submissions. We also, like Holly, like to have a headline in mind that can just clarify things. It also grabs our attention. We just have an inbox that we go through. It's really kind of old-fashioned. So it's much more compelling to see a submission that, as Sue always brings up, the headline, "The Rabbi Undid My Love Curse." Is that what it was? That is much more gripping than just modern love submission. But yeah, you have to write the entire piece because so much of it is in the telling of the piece. It could be, told in a million different ways.
What's interesting about that is that Modern Love could take more than a year to get back to you because they get so many submissions. So my students always say, what's a good subject heading? So Amy Klein, who's in my writing workshop, she had the fastest one that ever had a response, which was if I remember correctly, "The Rabbi Undid My Love Curse, Hanukkah pitch, Hanukkah piece / December 9th. And that one it was like she's like, sent it on a Wednesday. It was in by Sunday. So I always use that as a way to like, not only the title, but timely connection and the date in case the editor doesn't know. So that's like my favorite. And if you don't mind, I think that the 1,500 word pieces are, you guys are not reading them over the summer, but the tiny love stories are still open. Is that correct?
We close submissions twice for the main Modern Love column, 2 times a year, just so we can catch up on submissions. Right now we're closed, but we'll reopen in September. Tiny Love Stories is completely open. You can submit to it. We respond to every single person who submits to Modern Love, and that's why we have these periods where we go through and close the inbox. We don't respond to every Tiny Love Story submission because the volume's just too great.
Cool. No, and a lot of my students break in, they love it. Okay, Rakesh, I'm under the impression with editors at big houses that you don't work with writers directly. They can't contact you directly. They have to go through literary agents. And first, is that accurate? And also, it seems to me that your best bet is, and I think you did it yourself, if somebody, just general rules, if somebody's writing debut fiction, whether it's short stories or a novel, they have to write the whole book. But if it's nonfiction, they could write a proposal. and then they get an agent to contact you. Is that how it works usually?
Yeah, that's generally how it works. I mean, it's not to say that we never work with unagented projects, but for the most part, I would say 99% of the time that is the case. And I should say it's not just because we put up these walls to be exclusive or to be kind of exclusionary to other people, but because, there is a great volume of things that we have come in. There's obviously a sort of arbiter of taste aspect to it, of trusting agents and what they send you. But I would also advise that, my being a writer myself, it is in everyone's best interest if you have an agent representing your work, because they're making business decisions for you. It's a business relationship. They understand what's in your best interest as a writer for a long-term career. And that's why even when I find authors on my own with whom I would like to work, I always insist that if they're not working with an agent, that I pair them with one, or that I help them have somebody involved, because it's just, again, better for the career in the long term. And there will inevitably be conversations that necessitate some sort of, kind of intermediary in that role. And then about the fiction, nonfiction, yes, that is, again, that's true, that for fiction, you do have to write the entire thing. And that for nonfiction, if you're writing something like memoir, sometimes people will write a full memoir manuscript, and that can be beneficial because it gives the, agent and eventually the editor a full sense of what the book is. But yeah, generally for nonfiction, you can sell it on proposal. That usually comprises an overview of the project, an outline, some sample chapters, notes about what we call platforms, so the connections you have, the media outlets you might have access to, the people who might help you support the book, and then what we call comp titles, comparison titles, and competitive titles in the marketplace. So that's usually what is in a book proposal. But yeah, that's correct. That's usually the divide between the two.
Fantastic. And yeah, if anybody wants in my book, The Book Bible, I list all the different elements of the that you need for a book proposal. Okay, Joy, you do kids books. So as far as I can tell, there seems to be 3 categories, even though there's a lot of different areas in the category. So it's picture books, middle grade, and young adult. So could you tell us a little bit and interestingly, I didn't even realize that there could be middle grade and young adult fiction and nonfiction, right? So tell us a little bit about the categories that you handle at FSG.
Yep, that's right. At FSG, my team of editors, 6 of us plus me, we publish books for children up through teenagers. So we publish in 3 categories, as Sue said: picture books, middle grade, and YA. And picture books are generally your jacketed hardcover picture book for ages 4 to 7. Some of the picture books that we publish that are the most well-known are the Pout Pout Fish series or the Escargot series. A book that we don't publish but that folks might know is like Everyone Loves Tacos, or the sorts of books that you may have read when you were young or to your children, like Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, those sorts of classics, Madeline, etc. So those are basically books that adults read to children, parents or educators or caregivers. They're generally about 32 pages with illustrations, and they're generally about under 1,000 words. Then you get into middle grade, which is there are 2 different categories of middle grade. It can be like 8 to 12, which is pretty young middle grade, or it can be 10 to 14. And middle grade is kind of like those upper elementary school grades up through middle school. And that can be either fiction or nonfiction. It's mostly fiction, but sometimes it's nonfiction. It could be memoir, or it could be, stories about classic figures in history, or these days there's a lot more middle grade and YA nonfiction about stuff going on in the world. It could be politics or newer figures. We really are trying in publishing to bring to light nonfiction that's not just the same kind of folks that we've read about since I was in school. And then YA is teen, and those 2 categories are 12 and up or 14 and up. And the thing that makes the difference is really what the content is. It's 14 and up if the content is a little bit more mature, maybe there's more sexual content, maybe there's more drug use content, or just, topics that are better suited for the older teenager. And that's also nonfiction and fiction.
Great, fantastic. Now, Howard, I think you mostly do adult nonfiction, and you've switched over from the Ross Yoon agency to WME, which is one of the biggest agencies in the world. So if somebody wants to work with you, it seems as if they would have to have like an unusual great project. And I know one of my students contacted you, and she had a couple ideas and she had clips. Would you prefer that people wait until they have a completed proposal Or if somebody has clips and an idea, is it okay to email you and say, is this something you might be interested in?
No, I mean, I think I speak for everybody here. We would prefer that you come at us with the thing that you think is the best version of you and the writing. As much as we want to develop stuff, we just don't have the time to. And I kind of, if you're applying for a job or applying for college, you want to put your best foot forward. You want your best stuff out there. And what I tell people is that nobody knows who you are. Like the agents in the world don't know who you are until you decide to put yourself out there. So make sure that you're in the best place with your writing. And it's a big red flag if you write in your letter, I'm still working through this. I hope you can work with me on it, because what that says to me is that there's going to be a lot of unnecessary work that I'm going to have to put in that I don't have time for.
A lot of agents have said to me that if they see a piece, I mean, certainly in the New York Times Modern Love has launched, I've heard like 75 books, or the New Yorker, they would sometimes contact the author. Do you do that? Are there certain publications that you read to see if there's any authors you're interested in?
Yeah, I've done book deals just based on a magazine piece and no book proposal. But oftentimes those people are established writers, so they've been around for a while. And I think that there's, Rakesh and Joy can talk about this, but you have to have the confidence that a writer is going to be able to pull off the book. And if they've been out there writing, or if they've, better yet, if they've done a book before that's done well, then the easier it is to submit something that's maybe shorter, as long as the vision is clear. So we are able to do that, but I think if you're a first-time writer, you really have to sort of lay everything out there and try to prove yourself in every way.
Great. And Samantha, I know you've taken on some new clients. So do you agree that if it's a fiction project that they have to have completed the whole thing? If it's nonfiction, they can do a proposal? And where do you stand with memoir? Could it sometimes be proposal, sometimes a full manuscript?
Yes, I agree with all of that. In terms of memoir, I'm sort of sit on the fence. Like, I think that if you have a big platform and you're someone famous, or you have a zillion followers, it might be easier to convince publishers with just a proposal. But if your memoir is really dependent on the storytelling and like the quality of the writing and the voice, then I'm gonna need to see the manuscript.
Do you feel like someone has to have a completed proposal before they go to an agent? Like if someone published a great piece, are you interested in seeing a piece first, or do you really want them to have completed it before they contact you?
I think that if I were the person reaching out, then I would not expect a complete proposal. Like if you published a piece and it went viral and I was really excited about you, then no, I wouldn't expect anything. But if you're approaching me with your story, then I would want to see something more finely tuned. Because as Howard said, we just don't have the time to start from scratch a lot of the time.
Good. Okay. So one of my favorite questions is, what should a writer never do if we want to work with you? So, and I had a whole list of like emails we never finished reading. So it was like spelling names wrong. And though I've never read your publication or whatever. So Holly, what comes to mind is like, never do this. Like if there's typos in the lead, do you feel like I can't work with this person?
No, if there's a typo, but it's a really great pitch, it doesn't matter so much. But what I do have a bit of an issue with is sometimes I get a lot of pitches in towards the end of the week that say, hey, I thought this would be a light and whimsical Friday piece or weekend piece. And we are so beyond light and whimsical in this news cycle. It kind of just says to me, like, I phoned it in a bit with this pitch, but I thought maybe you would take it. Which is not what you really want to feel. You want to feel that someone is bringing you their stellar, top pitches, that you're fighting the New York Times for them or whatever, not that they kind of brought you their light and whimsical. And so it's not a good way to sell your pitch. I think, really back it or don't sell it at all.
And do you get the sense sometimes that people aren't really reading the independent carefully? They're just sort of sending you anything that they want versus what you're looking for?
People are definitely getting better at that. I think that might partly be because a lot of your students pitch me, Sue, so they know to do their due diligence. But it's a really good green flag if people bring up stories that we have recently published and link to them or say something specific about them, what they enjoyed or how they think it would fit in next to that. If they start out like that, I'm like, okay, yes, definitely, this email is worth reading to the end.
Great. And me, I've heard funny stories about what people get wrong with Modern Love, like that they want to write a piece about how they love their city or they love their job, and that you want love of a human. And also that Dan used to tell stories about people that would argue with him, like, or that would write a nasty note back, or they would, without being asked, they would rewrite the piece even though you didn't want to see it again. Can you tell us some of your pet peeves that people should never do?
I mean, if the formatting, we have submission guidelines. They're pretty easy to find if you Google how to submit to Modern Love or how to submit to Tiny Love Stories. The formatting is there kind of for a reason, just it gives us ease to read it. We ask that people paste the whole essay in the body of the email after writing, just like a quick top note. The cover letter doesn't matter. Your past publications actually don't even matter that much. You can certainly, add them if you want, but we almost scroll immediately to the story. Then we also ask you to attach it as a Word file. So then if we're interested in it, we can just kind of export it and start working on it. Pet peeves, I guess. If it's clear, yeah, you have no idea what kind of column it is, where it's poetry or it's, something totally different. Sometimes that's interesting. I'm not like upset about it, but I'm just like, we're not going to take this. I would say the biggest kind of pet peeve is actually later on in the editorial process. If you're fighting every single edit, it makes you not want to really work so much with them in the future, because it is a give or take. And I think it's good. Sometimes we're working too quickly. Sometimes we change things and it's actually makes it, sound strange, or it doesn't really sing in the same way. So I definitely would say stand by the changes that you feel strongly about. Perhaps suggest an alternative too, if you see that we're identifying some kind of problem. Don't just say, I don't like that. Like, it's sometimes helpful to be like, oh, maybe we could address it in this way. But yeah, I think the writers who really fight tooth and nail, it's difficult because we have a service to the readers to make it, readable to them or legible to them. Another thing I would say is I always talk about tiny love stories kind of as prose poems. I think they can be really beautiful in that way. That said, being too poetic, especially in the modern love essays, can kind of work against you. I love poetry. I love language. But I just think sometimes using very flowery language to describe something simple where you're like, I didn't understand that was like you were describing a car or like a cup of coffee, so those are the things that come to mind.
Good. And Alan, what makes you feel like I'm not dealing with this person?
Fighting me tooth and nail on edits is one huge problem. I mean, I hate it, and I will never ever somebody had to fight on edits, even if the story turned out great. It's just not worth the time and energy. A couple of things that have come up very recently, because Wire just launched its travel section, and I've been getting a lot of pitches. I mean, after the first week, I got like 300 pitches. And a lot of people not reading the website. So I'm getting a lot of pitches from people who are like, I'm an established travel writer. Here's an idea that I've covered before, not realizing that we've covered it already. And just because the section is new doesn't mean that this line of coverage is new to our publication. So, I mean, I'm getting pitches for things that we published 3 months ago that I could just Google and send them the link. So that's always, it's not a, I'll never work with you, but it's kind of a like, come on, do your due diligence before you reach out. The other thing that has been more of a problem lately, and I think that this might just be a symptom of the industry as a whole, but like I'm getting a lot of pitches on topics versus stories, and that's a huge difference. And I can't help you if you want to pitch a topic, but if you want to pitch me a story, that's great. So like with travel, for example, I get pitches like, oh, I want to write about EV charging. Okay, well, what about EV charging do you want to write about? Like, is it a service piece on like where to find chargers? Is it an introspection on like why gas stations aren't picking up EV chargers? But now I'm doing your job for you, and I don't know if you can execute on the idea that I've built off of your idea. So I get a lot of those pitches, and I send it around to other editors, and we always say the same thing. They're like, you're doing the work for the writer, and we don't know if the writer can deliver a good story on that. So we'll pass and wait for somebody else to pitch a similar idea. So it's tough. So definitely do, that's the kind of thing I'd say, make sure you do well before you start typing your email.
Okay, let's go to the agents first. So Samantha, as an agent, like what are you seeing that's like off base? What mistakes are people making? Are they not understanding the genre? Are they sending you work too early?
All of that, but also what I see most often is falls in line with what these other lovely panelists were saying, is that they don't pay attention to instructions or read my bio or know what I work on. So I get, like I don't represent picture books without illustrations, and I get hundreds, thousands of people sending me text only picture books. And I, don't work on projects over 150,000 words long. That's 2 book lengths. And I get 200,000, 300,000 word projects in my inbox. And that's like, you're wasting both of our time here. That's an auto reject. But yeah, like people who don't follow querying formats, I have posted a query letter template for free online. And so, if you're trying to be outside the box, that's not helpful, because querying is a tool that agents use to very quickly evaluate something. And if you're going outside of the given format, then I'm not able to properly evaluate it in the short amount of time that I have.
I have a lot of students that invent their own genre, so one came to me and it was like, okay, it's fairy tale stories that are really poetic, but then they have my psychology lessons in it. And I'm just like, don't invent your own genre for your first book. Like what shelf does it sit on in the bookstore?
Yeah.
What are mistakes that you see that with people that are contacting you, debut writers?
Look, romantasy wasn't a genre, years ago, but now it's the biggest category in fiction. But my pet, like Samantha said, query letters are like speed dating. You got to figure out, like, establish a connection quickly, be professional, courteous. My big pet peeve is when people ask me a question in the first line. What would happen if a nuclear bomb went off in Manhattan? And it's a question that I don't care about. I don't really want to be asked that or find the answer to. So I throw it away. There are 2 types of queries that I get. One are the queries like what Samantha said, it's a romance novel or sci-fi, and they obviously have no clue what I've done in the past. And I have a lot of projects to my name. So do a little homework. Also, people don't address you by your name. So it's pretty obvious that they're using a form. And if they're using a form, I'm just throwing the email away, because I don't want to spend any time replying to somebody who doesn't have the courtesy of addressing me. And then the other side, I've been getting really good queries lately, a lot of them. And people are doing their homework. So I think they're getting smarter, and it's forcing me, because I feel an obligation and I want to try to help these people. So I will take the time to read those.
Fantastic. Now, Joy, I know that most of the material that you're getting is through agents, but what are you seeing authors doing wrong? Are you seeing projects that are half boiled, that aren't ready yet?
It's funny. I've been thinking about that. I can answer it really through my freelance editorial lens, because at my job at FSG, we don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. So the submissions I get are from agents, and agents by and large do a great job. Some folks like kind of help the inbox too much. If I have like 3 to 5 submissions from an agent at one time, it's a little bit heavy, but it's also flattering because they want to work together. I don't really have a lot of pet peeves about the submissions I get at work, but as a freelance editor, I can see under the hood of the car a little bit more, because I'm working with people who are earlier. A lot of those folks don't have agents yet. Some of them do. And but the folks who don't have agents yet, I think part of the challenge that I see is, especially with picture books, people think it would be fun to write a picture book. And we've all been children, or they've raised children, or they've worked with children. And there's a sweet story they want to convey, but they haven't done the work of learning how to write a picture book. It's really, 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 really hard. A lot of people think they can do it. Most people can't, because it is like poetry. 1,000 words is really kind of the top end. It could be 500 or 750 words. There are some pretty hard and fast rules in my opinion for writing a really strong picture book. And I do get folks who have a very personal attachment. They have quite a long reason that they're drawn to it. They, it was inspired by something in their life or their mom or their child. And I always, I relish the opportunity to give folks feedback, and I'm happy to do it. But I do think that people come in with the idea that it's going to be easy. It's also a huge red flag for me when I'm looking at somebody's query letter for a picture book and they are referencing stuff that's way too lofty. They're like, it's like Dr. Seuss meets Where the Wild Things Are. Like, you can't do that. You can't have such lofty comps. Even Dragons Love Tacos, it's not a book that I worked on, but it's been on the bestseller list for X number of years. Like, don't comp so lofty. At the same time, don't comp so small that no one's ever heard of it, but sort of do the work, take the workshops, do the classes. And really it's the right thing I'm happy for folks to come to me as a freelance editor because I can impart that wisdom, but it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the freelancing. So Rakesh, what are you seeing? What mistakes? And I'm hearing that it's really difficult to sell memoirs these days. For non-famous people that don't have big platforms. Is that your experience?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that necessarily. I mean, I think memoir is having a tough time in terms of sales. I mean, I think that's worth acknowledging that we're at a time where we're seeing a sort of somewhat of a just kind of a lessening there, but I don't think that's permanent. And I don't think it's a truism either. I think that, I still work on many memoirs. I think people are still writing really, really special memoirs. So I don't think that should discourage anybody from exploring that as a genre or a form. But I do, my general note, which many people are touching upon, is you have to treat your correspondence for anything publishing related with the gravitas you impart to any other business related thing that you do. And I think I understand why people do this, because culturally we have a tendency to minimize the arts just in general. So people then apply that minimization to their correspondence when it comes to this realm. But that's not, you have to be all just as professional, if not even more so, when you're dealing with people in the book space, because as you're noting and on this panel, it's often the opposite. People often take an overly familiar kind of almost lackadaisical approach to this correspondence because it quote unquote doesn't count, or it's just a hobby or a practice. It's like, no, this is a business. We love books, we love writers, we want to champion the writing, but there's a lot of formality that you have to undergo to get to that stage. So I think that in any correspondence, as people are noting, like, double check it, understand why you're sending it to somebody, be respectful, be professional in the way that you are with the other people at whatever job you do. And so I think that's where people are often making mistakes, is being very complacent about that. I think the other thing too is just writing takes time, and it takes a lot of reworking and a lot of revising. And I think, somebody else should probably see what you're sending to somebody before you send it. I think people finish it off and they feel like they were in a burst of inspiration and they are being true to their voice. But I think everything can benefit from at least one other pair of eyes before you officially put it in a channel for something.
That's great. And I was actually going to ask people about any secret advice that people might not know that could help, might be able to help an author. And it's funny you say that, because my secret advice is Inside Secrets is really tough writing group weekly that'll like kill my work and tell me the truth. Therapy saved me from like billions of mistakes. And I pay ghost editors to help me before I send out anything. So those are my secrets. Holly, is there anything that you could think of that people might not officially already understand about publishing that might be able to help them break into the independent?
To break into the independent, I think it's worth looking not just at random articles that we've done, but maybe noticing our repeat columnists. If you see people who we commission again and again, you can see how they are perhaps following a tone or a style, or they're really getting in on an angle that is interesting repeatedly. And so if you want to get to know the publication, sometimes it's really good to like take a look at a couple different repeat authors and see what they're doing that piques our attention, because those people are clearly pitching all the time and we're saying yes. So I think that's one that people don't talk about as often, but can be much more helpful than just kind of scattergunning and taking that approach to looking at what we've got up there.
I heard an editor say recently, tell me something I don't know. And it does seem like a lot of the pieces from the Independent are kind of counterintuitive, they're unusual. So you probably, a lot of times, like, the first thing you think of is probably already been written, right? So you have to be a little more weird or interesting or flip it.
Yes, and also, I mean, Alan was kind of talking earlier about, you know, don't make me do your job as the writer, and I think that's really important in terms of thinking about what position the editor is in, and the editor usually, especially now, has a limited amount of budget, a lot of in-house staff at their disposal. So the in-house staff are going to take all of the obvious lines. So, for instance, Joe Biden drops out. We already have a quick rapid response piece ready to go, and we have a rapid response writer who's there. So when my inbox fills up with 100 people saying, hey, Biden just dropped out, I want to do the rapid response, there's no way you're getting that commission, really. But what you are going to get is the really quick, really interesting new angle on that only you can do. So really think about it, maybe keep a spreadsheet or something about your areas of expertise or your experiences and how you can apply that to news, because that is, if you can be quick off the mark and have an interesting angle, that's just gold dust for us.
I remember thinking it'd be really hard for me to write anything politically because I don't necessarily have a platform, but I remember when there was a Michigan recount with Trump, I immediately realized that I was recounting which of my relatives had voted for him. And that was my little weird angle to get in that was timely. So I always,
yeah, absolutely. We had somebody write about us when Trump first got in, saying I've stopped talking to all of my family members who voted for Trump. And that was interesting at the time. He came back a couple of years later and he was like, you know what? I was wrong. I started talking to them again. And this is how I approached it. And this is how we bridged those gaps. And he did that piece and that exploded for us. And that's still doing well for us, even though we put it up years ago. So sometimes just following up your story that way can be really interesting too.
great. And Miya, a lot of times I hear you say that Modern Love has been going so long now and you want something you haven't seen before. So it seems like a lot of the early drafts that I'm seeing from my students they're a little bit typical, you know, meet cute, fall in love type stories. And also it seems like some people just have stories set in the past with nothing modern about them. So is that a problem? Do you need something new happening or some new perspective on a relationship if it happened a long time ago?
Usually, yes. We do get submissions where people are writing about their grandparents' epic love story. Very cool, but it has to be your perspective and as modern as possible. Although we definitely dip into the past. For instance, the essay we're publishing this week, I think is very beautiful, but it's set in the present. A woman in middle age is going through her basement and she comes across these very passionate love letters from a lover one summer. And it was kind of just like circumstantial that it didn't work. They were too young. They were going on different paths, kind of a past lives type situation where she's saying, I'm not regretting the relationship I'm in, the kids I have, etc. Why am I talking about this? It's set in the past. A lot of it is set in the past. We definitely do dip into the past, though. I feel like it's not a hard and fast rule. And because the column has gone on for 20 years, like, it's very hard to find a topic that we haven't covered, although there are certainly topics that we haven't. I would say I definitely gravitate towards stories about friendship and about sibling relationships. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. There's constant drama and dynamics and love and interest. And I think we don't talk about that enough. When it comes to kind of tricks, I would say also when you're writing your piece, don't give away the surprise at the very beginning. Build intrigue. The most kind of important parts of any story probably are the beginning and ending, but the beginning's about building intrigue. The ending is really tough, and usually that's where we kind of work with writers the most. But I would say even if it's a sad piece, and a lot of the submissions we get are very sad, the biggest lesson I think for Modern Love is that we're mortal. You can find humor in it. That's always super appealing. And also writers who tend to be kind of self-deprecating. So like we do also get a lot of submissions of people just saying like, this person really sucks and they broke my heart in this way. It's like not interesting. It should be an interrogation of yourself.
Interesting. Yeah, I always say the best rule for first person writing is you have to question, challenge, out and trash yourself more than anyone else in the piece.
Exactly.
Good. Alan, what kind of advice do you give? You've helped so many people break in. So I know that you're actually very encouraging and you tell people not to be afraid to try.
That's right. Even like when I was at the Times, I used to tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, yeah, the Times has a particular standard of writing. You can meet that standard. It's possible. You don't need like 15 years of journalism just to like get your story published. Like if you're a writer and you have confidence and you know how to report and you know how to write, you can write for anywhere. A couple of tips that, I don't give people a lot, and I'm feeling charitable today. For Wired, at least, one thing you're going to hear a lot back from all of the editors at Wired is, is this a story that moves the conversation forward? Right. And that's code for two things. One, is it saying something that, like Holly said, is that we haven't heard before? And also, is this something I can read on any old website? Because if the answer is yes, I'm not going to take it. I had a writer who pitched me a great long set of articles that he wanted to write, and he included like SEMrush details and SEO stats, and like, I wrote this for another publication and it did this well and everything. That's great. That's great information for you to keep to yourself. Because by telling me that you wrote this and it went viral for somebody else, I can't capture that lightning in a bottle two times. I'm not going to commission it. You already did the thing for someone else. So that's another thing. But yeah, that's like, I think that like the one thing that the big advice that I tell people is like, think about not just what it is you want to write, but how is that going to differentiate your story from all the other stories on the same topic, right? Lots of people have personal anecdotes or personal stories that they're passionate about, but you really need to find a way to make this unique, because that's going to be the only way we pick it up anymore. I mean, this industry is murderous. Like, we all have to make money, and we have very limited budget to fill, so that's my advice.
Great. And Rakesh, maybe you could tell us from the standpoint, you're a novelist and you're buying books. So is there any advice that that you could give from the perspective of being an author yourself?
I think, again, it goes back to that point of making sure your work is in the best shape it can be before you share it with people. I think, there are little tricks for doing that. I think people putting your writing away for a little bit can be helpful. If it's 2 weeks, even just to put it away for a bit and then come back to it with fresh eyes can be very helpful. I know the novelist Alex Chi has something he recommends to people where he'll say, put it in a different font and print it out and read it because it looks different to you. You're so used to looking at it in the same format. I think this is another kind of common piece of advice among editors and writers alike, which is to read your work aloud, because if you stumble over reading your work aloud, there's a high chance the reader will stumble in reading it. So I think there are certain stylistic things you can keep in mind there. I think too, this, people have touched upon this, but I think, we are working in an industry. So I think this idea of like new genres that happen, I think like any other sort of creative endeavor, you have to look at the landscape and see what exists and study what's there. And then like anything else, you can learn the rules of that and then bend the rules to your will. And so I think it isn't just throwing everything out and saying I'm creating something completely brand new. I think you have to understand it's the context in which you live and everything that came before you and everything to come, to paraphrase a current moment. But I think you have to kind of have a sense of what's working. But I think use those guideposts in your writing and see how your work either aligns or kind of deviates from that. And that can even find its way into your pitching and your querying to say that this is, this may remind you of these things, but I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z, and, and don't belabor the point, but I think it's helpful to kind of understand the tradition you're working in and to look at your work that way and see how it might be perceived by people who are then on the professional end reviewing it.
Great. And Howard, is there any advice that you could give to people, especially if they want to be handled by an agency like WME? Are you agreeing that they should really work on the proposal or the idea before they would even come to you?
All of that, and then just some secrets for you all that are free and easy for you to do, which is I tell everyone to be a student of the business, like study the business of publishing. Every week, go on the New York Times and look at the list, see what's on the bestseller list, and try to ask yourself, why are these books on the list? If it's Matthew McConaughey, you sort of know why. but there are other books that come out, and start tracking books that are out, see where they end up in book promotion, read Publishers Weekly, read LitHub, read Poets and Writers, read everything you can get your hands on, and understand our side of the business. Because if you do that and you come to us and it's clear that you sort of get it and that you have a sense of the professional aspect of what you're aspiring to, then you instantly become like a much easier client for us to deal with. And you know, that side, the whole sort of babysitting a client side aspect of our job, which we're always trying to avoid, is something that, you know, we don't have to worry about. So there's all this stuff that's free and available for you every week. If you learn a little bit more at a time, you'll really improve yourself.
Great, and I waited till the end for Joy and Samantha because you guys both do freelance editing, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I swear by ghost editors, and actually I had a former editor who I paid to help me with my first book, the memoir that had been rejected a lot, sold it to Random House, and then she helped me sell my first novel. And after that, I felt like I saw God, and if I could afford it, I always use ghost editors. So Joy, could you tell us a little bit about, I especially send, I know that especially picture books and YA and MG, I send them to you. And could you explain what a ghost editor does? To me, it feels like it's like this fantasy where you get to work with a professional person at a publishing house who will tell you the truth and understands the market.
Yeah, I call it freelance editor, but we can call it, some people call it ghost editor. On the side, I do freelance editing for people in children's books, picture books, middle grade, and YA. And as I mentioned, I love doing it. I think it can be very helpful. I've worked with clients. I worked with my very first client, had a wonderful agent, and his middle grade had gone out on submission and he had been rejected, but with all very similar notes. And he agreed that these were things that he wanted to work on. And we had a great experience. He did a great job. He was hearing the notes, but he didn't quite know how to really dig in and interpret them. So we did a revision that I feel really good about for him, and hopefully that will land. And then there are some folks who are kind of earlier on in their journeys. I think that the main thing is to make sure that you are working with somebody who's reputable, because in children's books is what I know, so I can't speak for adult, but there is some unreputable stuff that goes on in children's books. There are people who will say, you know, pay me X amount of money and I promise you'll get published, you know, do my workshop for this weekend and you'll get published, or I'll introduce you to folks who are going to publish you. You know, I have worked in this industry for 27 years at, you know, big houses, so I like to think I know what I'm doing. And I would never promise anybody that working with me will get you published. I cannot promise that. What I can promise you is that I'll help you make your work the best it can be. I'll do the same level of work that I would for any author that I work with at FSG, but I also do have a very strict legal disclaimer when I work with any freelance client about the separation of my job and my freelance job, because you don't want to work with anybody who's going to offer you what I call pay for play. You know, I think that it's very buyer beware, which is one of the reasons that I'm always grateful to get clients from Sue, because like they know Sue and Sue knows me, and I'm a real person who works in this industry. So just be very careful. The last thing I'll say is there was a lovely freelance client I worked with, so fantastic, an older woman with a Christian interest, middle grade. And I was trying to suggest that she reach out to agents who could place her book in the Christian market. And she told me that she heard back from many people who were claiming to be like within the Christian market, who were charging her money. Not cool, people, not cool. And she said, I wanted to check with you. I was like, no. And I'm not talking about charging money for a freelance edit. I'm saying people who are saying, oh, if you pay me X amount of money, I'll place your book. Or if you pay me X amount of money, I'll publish your book. So please, 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 like if something feels wrong, listen to that part inside of you.
Joy, by the way, I tell my students, go through me, because I only work with editors and agents I know, and not just somebody might be a good editor, but if they're not, you know, that they're working somewhere else, but if they're not a book editor or literary agent, or they don't do magazine newspaper work themselves, they don't understand the market. So
and if they're not the right match, I always say to folks, I have a system. I don't just take anyone. I say no to a handful. I say no to clients, because if I feel that I can't bring value to your work, I will not edit it. I want you to get what you pay for. I cannot ethically take someone's money if I can't give them a good read. If I don't know the market, if it's high fantasy or something I don't know, you should really, really think about where you spend your money and spend it only with the person who's the best match
Well,
for
and
you.
speaking
But it
of
can be very
fantasy,
helpful.
Samantha, you know fantasy. So what genres do you said that you do ghost editing for different genres, right?
Yeah, I do a little bit of everything, honestly. Just because I used to work for Al Zuckerman at Writers. He was the founder of Writers House. And he's the only person I ever knew who didn't specialize. And so when I was his assistant, I was reading, memoir, I was reading nonfiction science books, I was doing adult romance, erotica. Like I literally edited everything. And now as in my work as an agent with Thompson, I'm the only agent at our agency who represents children's books. And so I do feel comfortable moving between the various genres, but I have nearly 12 years of expertise in the industry. So, I'm not just nobody from nowhere. So I definitely think you should vet whoever you're working with.
And also you have up on manuscript wish list the kind of books that you're looking for, right? Because that's a really good resource if people are looking for agents, I think, because they list a lot of agents and sometimes even editors will list what genres they do, right?
Yeah, I have profiles on Manuscript Wishlist and Publishers Marketplace, and you can find all of those posted on my Twitter. There's a profile up on the Thompson Literary Agency website as well. So I'm very easy to find. I'm the only Samantha Wekstein on Google. So
Okay, so now last question for you guys. What are you plugging? What do you want us to know about? So Holly, very exciting. Clickbait, your debut novel coming out. And I know that you have a reading. Tell us about the reading that you have coming up.
So Clickbait, yes, coming out August the 13th. I'm doing a sort of reading launch event at P&T Knitwear that I have shared the link to in the chat very quickly. It's very much a woman going through it book. It's about someone who just torched her own life completely and got cancelled, etc., and now churns out clickbait in a sort of tabloid factory. It's darkly humorous. I basically wrote it to process my parents' multiple divorces rather than go to therapy, and I'm really hoping that I see lots of people there at the event on the 13th.
Fantastic. So Miya, I know I've already bought like 10 copies of Tiny Love Stories for presents for people. So what else are you working on now? Is there anything? I know that you did a really cool video essay that you worked on at the New York Times.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was working for a while on this Asian American pop culture project about how Asian Americans, who are the fastest growing racial group in the United States, are shaping pop culture. We published a piece about how Asian languages are now used in so many American movies and TV shows, and how that is a huge change. Like subtitles, Americans used to be kind of allergic to subtitles, but that no longer seems to be the case. Case in point, Shogun in the 1980s didn't have any Japanese, and the Japanese that was in it wasn't subtitled at all. And now Shogun today is like, predominantly Japanese, and then Portuguese and English. But that was a really cool, beautiful digital article. And then another one about the rise of Asian grocery stores like H Mart, Patel Brothers, and Ranch 99, and how that's kind of shaping eating habits and the grocery market. Then we have a really interesting one coming up about how Asian men have been portrayed in Hollywood and how that affects real Asian men's romantic lives. Beyond that, we're also working on the 20th anniversary of the Modern Love column this October. We're trying to put together a big package on that, perhaps even an event, although the event might come kind of later, especially because of the election. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it right now.
And the international TV show. A couple of my students have had luck. International TV show. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, we have, the Modern Love has the domestic version. It also has Modern Love Mumbai, Modern Love Chennai, Tokyo, Amsterdam, all these other places.
And what's so cool is if they take your piece, you get thousands of extra dollars for the TV version. So
They
that's
can
so
pay better than we can. Yeah, that's for sure.
okay, Alan. So we love Seen, Heard, and Paid, and we're waiting for it to come out in paperback. And in the meantime, you got a big promotion, right, at Wired?
Yeah, about 6 months ago. Yeah, I'm a director of special projects now, I guess. But I would say for folks who want to keep up with me, I have a newsletter called Productivity Without Privilege. It is a series of tips and tricks for navigating professional spaces if you are a marginalized person. Includes people of color, queer people, people with disabilities, older people, everybody like that. So subscribe to that, and there may be more. And I would say if you can buy a copy of Seen, Heard, and Paid, and you haven't already, please do, because I'm working on a book proposal, and those sales numbers are going to help out a lot when I get in touch with my agent again. So,
And when you
by
pitch
all
these
means.
editors, always say, I just went to buy your book at the Strand.
Yes,
Go
at the
cancel it.
Strand.
Wait, that's a great way to start your pitch letter. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Rakesh, so aside from your, you have two great novels, award-winning novels, yourself, No One Can Pronounce My Name, and Blue Boy. Are there any other books that you want to tell us about that you have coming out from your publisher?
Yes, I'll mention two actually. One is a memoir that we just published last month that I love called Woman of Interest by a writer named Tracy O'Neill. It is a noir memoir about her efforts during the pandemic to locate her Korean birth mother. It is an electric book. It is so exciting to read this book. She's an amazing writer. We've got great attention for her thus far. She's a novelist. She's published 2 novels, so she brings a kind of novelist's keen sensibility to the book. It reads, when I first read it, actually, it reminded me of reading kind of early Kathy Acker. It's very innovative on the line level, but I just love that book. And I have a feeling we'll probably see some film version at some point. And then speaking of film versions, this is a novel that we published last year that's now out in paperback that I just think is a modern masterpiece called The Laughter by a writer named Sonora Jha. It is a book I compare to a cross between Disgrace and Lolita. It's narrated by a 50-something white male college professor who develops an obsession with his new colleague, who's a very outspoken Pakistani law professor, and it gets darker and darker and darker. It is a masterpiece, like I said, and it's actually being turned into a film by the writer and director who did Joyland, that Oscar-nominated movie. So I highly recommend that book. It's very good.
Cool. And
thank
Howard,
you, Sue.
yeah, huge step up. William Morris endeavors department as a partner and literary agent. So congratulations on that. And is there any books in particular that you worked on at the Ross Yoon agency that are already out that we could buy that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I just want to sort of echo and emphasize what Rakesh and Miya said about their Asian authors and Asian projects. I'm obviously pro-Asian, so any of those things I'm fully supportive of. So go check those out. I did a memoir that just came out called All the Worst Humans, about a PR crisis manager who worked for Gaddafi and Assad and Qatar, and lived to regret it. And so he wrote a memoir about it. And this is something that, this guy came to me 2 years ago with just a little bit of an idea. And it came out. It's one of Amazon's best books of 24. And we just sold the TV rights. So I'm excited about that.
Wow. And Joy, I know you've been winning awards and writing fantastic pieces, most recently for Huffington Post and Salon. So congratulations on that. And I know one of your books is from a former student, Jawbreaker, and a former student, Christina Wyman. And I know she has a new book coming out. Anything else that you want to tell us to go out and buy?
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to plug Christina. And I just wanted to say something about that, which is that this is a Sue lesson, which I'll now say back to Sue, is that if you're looking to get a book deal, writing an essay is a really great way to get in, because I am an essayist. I read a lot of essays and I read the stuff that Sue posts on her Facebook. And that's how I sign up, a lot of books. I like to work in a proactive style. I like to develop things from essays. So that's how I found Christina Wyman, who did Jawbreaker and Slouch. She now has 4 books under contract with us, 1 a year, fall 23, 24, 25, and 26. And then for my own work as well, I found that to be such great advice from Sue. I just had a piece come out from Huffington Post, and I'm working on a collection of essays for a book, hopefully coming soon. So really start short form. You never know who's going to see your piece, especially if someone like Sue is putting it out there where editors and agents can read it.
Fantastic. And Samantha, I've had the honor of working with you. I think it's 4 books in 4 years, including the Forgiveness Store. So actually what's interesting is all different genres too. And Samantha also recently sold a picture book, a debut picture book by a former student named Orlando Mendiola. So we're going to celebrate. What else, anything else we should go out and buy that you're working on?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to tell everyone Forgiveness Tour and The Last Tamale by, by Orlando. Let's see. Besides those two, and all the books I've done with Sue, which you should all go buy immediately, I would say that I had a picture book come out called Peg Gets Cracking, about a chick who is inside her egg and is too afraid to come out, but you can't help but keep growing, and she's suddenly pegged the egg with legs, and so that book came out a few months ago, and there's a sequel coming out, Peg's Plucky Adventure. The cover just got posted, so you can go pre-order that. And I had a beautiful middle grade come out called Dinner at the Breakfast. That was my most recent book published, about a girl who lives at a truck stop diner, and she, her dad suffers from depression, and it's one of his bad days, and she finds out that this mean trucker stole something of her dad's, and she knows she can't fix her dad's depression, but she goes on this adventure with these other kids to steal it back, and it's really sweet and really fun, and a little sad, and you should all go get it. Dinner at the Breakfast.
Awesome, great. And I have next week, actually, I have an in-person event, and email me if you want to know about it. And I'm starting a new class on Monday. And thanks to all the panelists. And I also just want to say briefly that the Strand is an amazing bookstore. It's one of my favorite independent bookstores. We have to support independent bookstores. If we don't, then we're not going to have any places to do events online or in person. And not only can you get everybody here, not only can you get their books at the Strand, they also have great tchotchkes. So they have like really cool book bags and all kinds of greeting cards and really cool notebooks and pens. And it's just a fantastic place. I actually get all of my students and friends and colleagues gift cards. They have like really cool, funny gift cards. So we really want to thank the Strand and keep them rolling. And thank you guys so much. And since it was short, we didn't have time to answer questions, but you guys can email me. I've quit all my other addictions, so now I'm addicted to email. So I promise I'll get back to you. And thank you guys so much for coming. And thanks, Elena, for hosting us.
Of course. Yeah, I'm just going to echo my thanks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. I left some links to our panelists' books that we have at the Strand. We'll be adding some more soon. We're dealing with some website updates, so look forward to those. Yeah, have a great night, everyone. Until next time.